Okay. So this talk is going to be talking about neographies, a term coined in the early 19th century to designate a new system or method of writing or spelling. More recently is used to refer to constructed script, or more simply, a newly invented script. In this presentation, it will refer to a script created in the 20th or 21st centuries. Most newly invented scripts are from Africa or South Asia. I'll be discussing about neographies from Africa. My co-presenter, Anjuman Pandey, will be talking about neographies from South Asia. Work on a number of newly invented scripts into Unicode has been undertaken by my project, the Script Encoding Initiative, which is housed in the Department of Linguistics at UC Berkeley. To date, the project has shepherded over 70 scripts into Unicode. Basically, I work with user communities to explain the process of getting a script into Unicode, and occasionally I help them partner with a veteran Unicode proposal author. When the project started in 2002, it could sometimes be difficult to explain what Unicode was and its role in getting a script onto computers and devices. When the project, however, the successful implementation of various modern scripts in Unicode on computers and devices in recent years has led to several groups clamoring for their script to get into Unicode, and in particular, to use the script in software and on social media, especially mobile devices. The process of getting a newly invented script may be viewed by the casual observer as a simple process. Create a new script, get it into Unicode, and then it will be supported on mobile phones and Facebook and other social media platforms. However, one of my goals is to provide those asking for a script in Unicode with a more accurate description of the process. In particular, emphasize that the proposal creation, review, and approval can be very lengthy, at least 2 years, but frequently more. Also, I found it's important to point out that even after a script is in Unicode, there are other elements needed before a script is fully implemented: font, keyboard, CLD or data, etc., which also take time. And I may now be mentioning that the approval process may, in the near future, be tightened up, so scripts will need to have the technical details fully spelled out in the proposal before approval. So I wear a second hat as chair of the Script Ad Hoc. The Script Ad Hoc is a group of Unicoders with background and interest in scripts. The group meets at least once a month to review proposals for new scripts and characters that are not emoji or CJK. We make recommendations to the Unicode Technical Committee on proposals, but also aim to assist proposal authors on how they can improve their proposal so that it contains all the necessary information. A basic set of questions has been developed by the Script Ad Hoc for those requesting a newly invented script to be approved in Unicode. And there's 3 main topics. The first one involves users. How many people are using the script today? And how many are using it in their daily lives? The second question concerns publications. Are there publications not produced by the script's author that are available? Is a script used for publication of newspapers, pamphlets, or books? How many books have been in the script have been produced? This is an image of a children's book for an experimental script project. This book was written by the person who's developing the script, so in this case, additional publications would be needed. The third main set of questions involves the usage of the script, particularly in schools. How many people are learning the script in schools today? Are there any graduates of the school, and if so, how many? Of course, school could refer to informal group settings where the script's being taught, and could also online classes. Lastly, is there evidence the script's use is growing? Of course, one of the problems is how to get solid statistics on such numbers. There are various reasons for creating a new script. It preserves a group's unique linguistic identity and heritage, differentiating one group from another. It's often considered a unique cultural contribution, viewed with pride since most scripts are created by a member of the community. I'll now be talking about African neographies, which have some shared but also different features from the neographies that Anjuman will be talking about from South Asia a little bit later in the presentation. African neographies are a way to write the indigenous languages of Africa, not tied to the colonial empires. This is a very common comment by script creators and users of the neographies. Another feature is that the scripts are often considered by users to be better suited to represent the sounds of the language over Latin or Arabic. Also, the new script is viewed as being able to improve literacy, because the script typically is geared to the native tongue of the students and is not dependent on the students knowing French, English, Portuguese, or other language of the governmental institutions. In some cases, the script creators may have a vision that the script could be extended to be used for some or all languages of Africa. Of course, this kind of goes against the idea that a script was created to write a particular group's language. Nevertheless, I wanted to relay this sentiment because it's an aspirational goal that was voiced by some script creators, particularly in an effort to de-Latinize the writing of African languages. Most African neographies are created to write languages of West Africa. This map is from Piers Kelly, who studied the development of scripts, especially in West Africa. And a few of the African neographies are connected to religious groups. I have an internal list that I'm keeping of these neographies in Africa. Right now there's about 35, but most appear to be individual projects that are not spread widely. Some scripts and their glyphs may be tied to historical pictographs or objects associated with the group. This image is one showing the relation between the simplified Nsibidi character and its original glyph, part of this experimental script project developed for Igbo and other cross-river languages of Nigeria and Cameroon. The letters are built on or inspired by this older set of symbols called Nsibidi, which date from about 400 to 1400 AD. And this set of symbols, Nsibidi symbols, are the ones that were used in the alphabet for the 2018 movie Black Panther. Several recent neographies now have a presence online, such as tutorials on YouTube or Facebook videos, or a presence in Facebook groups. The online presence for recently created scripts shows that Unicode is understood as a cornerstone in getting that script onto computers and mobile devices. I haven't really fully investigated this, but I would guess the recognition of Unicode may well be influenced by the success of Wancho and Adlam. In addition, the online presence and news media reports confirm that users and the public understand well the importance of digitization for the survival of the script and its role in preserving the language. Lastly, thanks to the internet, it can be easy to communicate with other communities throughout the world, and there can be an interest in some of these newly invented scripts from members of the diaspora, particularly as the new script is identified as an emblem of heritage and identity. So I'm going to present briefly 3 case studies from Africa. In the 3, you'll see elements of African neographies, which I've already mentioned. The first is a very recently created script, Jenticha Sunuwar, devised in the 2010s by linguists, designers, and software programmers. It's used for the Bantu languages of South Africa and surrounding countries. The script's name, Jenticha Sunuwar, is Sesotho. In Zulu, the script has a different name. Both names are used, and according to my contact, Pule Welch, there's no politics around the language variety used for the script. Interestingly, this is a case where the script is used for a group of languages. The script is a featural syllabary, drawing on shapes that appear from symbolic design traditions from Southern Africa, such as Sesotho mural art or Zulu beadwork. So I asked my contact about the use of color in the writing, and he reported it's not required. There are different traditions about the use of color, and it serves sort of an expressive function. The script is currently not taught in schools, but it's being introduced at universities and college programs, particularly in design-based courses and part of some linguistics programs. There's also small groups that are using the script. The Jenticha website cited on the slide mentions text word processing will be available once Jenticha Sunuwar is recognized by the Unicode consortium. So there's already awareness of Unicode, but right now there's no proposal yet. There's reportedly interest in the script in Africa, especially in southern Africa, as well as interest around the world. There are apparently no books in the script, but some shorter pieces of writing and an article from a magazine. This is from a magazine in 2016, shown on the screen. My contact mentions that in South Africa, it appears to be used sort of as a talisman rather than as a means of conveying language, but this could change. In some, Ditima is a relatively new script, which is still nascent, but may grow. It's difficult at present to gauge its current use, but if it starts getting taught in schools or universities, it may become more widespread. The second case study is Garai, used to write the Wolof language in Senegal and surrounding countries. It's older than the Ditima script, having been created in 1961 by a Sanafe who's very recently passed away. There are some materials, including the Quran. The script runs right to left, having been influenced by Arabic, and it's an alphabet. It's being taught informally. The creator's son reports that it's being taught by individuals in Gambia, Ghana, Morocco, the US, and Canada. And he feels the number of users is growing, and it could be as much as in the thousands. An introductory Unicode proposal was first put forward by Anshuman Pandey in 2011, followed by later proposals by Michael Everson. There's still some outstanding issues that need to be resolved, and the proposal's sort of been in a holding pattern. It's been difficult to get a review of the entire proposal by Garai users. The script in general appears to have a much lighter online presence compared to Ditima. It has a font, Facebook page with a small handful of followers, and a YouTube channel with a few teaching videos. Of sort of a side note here is that the script appears on an onboard computer screen in season 2, episode 4 of Star Trek Discovery, and Oboe for Charon. I didn't sit and watch the whole thing, but I know that's true. So Garai falls into the group of scripts that have some print material with informal teaching going on. From my standpoint, it's difficult to ascertain just how widespread the script is and whether much new content is being created. The last example is for Beria or Erfe, an alphabet used to write the Zagawa language of Western Sudan, Chad, and the diaspora. The script was created in the 1950s by Adam Tajir to write the Zagawa language, and it was later revised by Siddiq Adam Issa. The glyphs derive from camel brands, as those shown on the left-hand picture. A 2008 proposal was written by Lorna Priest Evans of SIL, and a non-standard font produced by SIL is now being widely used. Currently, there's a lot of great interest in getting Beria into Unicode, but it appears to be being used slightly differently by the community. There are outstanding questions on how to mark tone, the vowels, and a few other topics that still need to be discussed. So Siddiq, who's the one who revised the script, would like to add some characters, mostly for phonemes used in Arabic loanworks. Another player is Sadiq, who has an active online presence. He's been producing materials and doing training, but his use of the script appears to be somewhat inconsistent compared to that of Siddiq. And then there's a third party, which is a group of Facebook users led by someone living in Turkey who's been actively creating content. So there remains high interest in getting the script into Unicode, but the community needs to coalesce on the elements of the script and their behavior before something closer to a mature proposal would be ready. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Anshuman to talk about South Asian or Neographies.
Yeah, so this is a topic that's really near and dear to me, and I spent a lot of the past decade plus researching and speaking to communities within South Asia who are attempting to use and to propagate newly invented scripts. So what I would like to do in this talk is give an overview of Neographies in South Asia and some of the new ones, but then also go into a discussion about some of the metrics that we can use in the script ad hoc and just within the Unicode world in general for evaluating the suitability of encoding certain neographies. And some of the metrics that I'll present are an extension of what Deborah has already presented. And I'd like to engage the room in having a discussion on the metrics. And this kind of follows on the tail of discussions that are currently happening on the Unicode mailing list, where there seems to be some interest and a lot of discussion regarding neographies, conscripts, and scripts that kind of fall within that category. So within Unicode, there are quite a few neographies from South Asia that are encoded in the standard, and there are several others that are being considered for encoding by the script encoding. Sorry, by the script ad hoc. 2 have been approved for inclusion and will be in the next version of Unicode, and there are several pending. And the scripts that are pending that have probably the best likelihood of getting encoded are Sunuwar, Tolong Siki, and Gurung Khema. But before we go into that, neographies have a very interesting and very long tail history within South Asia. Now, script development has been a continuous phenomenon in South Asia since at least the 5th century BCE, or perhaps even going back to the 24th century BC, depending on what your view is in terms of the evolution of Brahmi. Now, whether it was created within the 5th century or whether it has longer ancestry that has it emerging out of the Indus signs. So at least since the 5th century BCE, people have been creating scripts and taking scripts that already exist and modifying them so that there is some sort of organic evolution of these scripts. So we can define a South Asian neography as one that is genetically unrelated to other scripts, so not organically derived from Brahmi or Latin or Arabic or other scripts, and that it is an indigenous creation, that it was purposefully and practically created by an individual for the purpose of writing a language. So nothing that flows from Brahmi would be considered a neography, no offshoots like Pallava or Pew. Those are all just organic scripts, just for the sake of definition. Now, as Deborah mentioned, there are several motivations for script creation in Africa. Those overlap with South Asia. There is a very strong anti-colonial component to script creation in South Asia, as well as a anti-missionary component, so that a lot of communities wanted to move away from the Roman alphabet that was imposed by Baptist missionaries and others, and also want to separate themselves away from majoritarian scripts, Bengali, Devanagari, etc., and to have a script of their own. But one of the key motivating factors is for a community to have a distinctive visual marker for their language and for their community, so that they somehow stand apart from the multilingual polyglot environment that is most states of India, Pakistan, Nepal, and northwestern Burma. Another key factor for script creation is getting parity with written languages. So there is a tradition within India that stems from the colonial period that a language is only legitimate if it has a written form. And a language is even more legitimate if it has a written form that is unique to itself and not shared by others. We see this kind of playing out in script politics and script debates with, let's say, Assamese and Bengali, where the name that you attach to a particular writing can wreak like upheaval within a given community and their identity and their relationship with their writing system. Now, related to that is a motivation to separate their language and their community from their neighbors. And this goes back, let's say, to the Assamese-Burmese issue, or Assamese-Bengali issue, but also within minority language communities that often get grouped under, let's say, a macro family, like the Munda language speakers or the Tibeto-Burman speakers of the Northeast. So there's an intent there to have themselves propped up and to use their new script as that marker for that distinction. And then there is, in many cases, a very practical motivation, and that is to develop an orthography in a new script that expresses the phonology of that language better than others. This is a feature that we find more typically among Tibeto-Burman languages of Northeast India, Nepal, and Burma, and that's primarily because those languages are tonal. Now, there are three well-known classic South Asian neographies. This is Old Chiki, Warang Citi, and Sora Sompeng. For some reason, Noto Warang Citi does not render properly in PowerPoint 2021. So this is something Peter talked to you about at some point. Now, these were encoded in Unicode at an early stage, and so Old Chiki was developed in 1925 by Raghunath Murmu for writing Santali, which is a Munda language. And the intent was to provide a distinctive script for Santali speakers that resonated with the living world around them. So he created a script whose letter forms mimicked things that the Santali people found in nature and that they interacted with on a daily basis. Very similar to the factors that lead to the creation of glyphs in Africa that Deborah had mentioned. Another one is Warang Citi, which was supposedly developed but also channeled by Lako Bodra in the 1950s. He claimed that he received this script from an individual who had developed it in the 13th century, and there was a psychic transmission through the astral sphere of the script to Lako Bodra, who used it for writing Ho, another Munda language, and it was developed by him as an alternate to the orthographies that were being propagated by Christian missionaries among the tribal communities of central and eastern India. And then there is Sora Sompeng, which was developed by Amange Gomango for writing Sora, another Munda language, in 1936. And this is a liturgical script that was used for Sora practices. Other neographies that are now in Unicode that kind of fall outside the pale of the classic scripts, there are two scripts by Pao Chin Hao, who was a tandem speaker in Chin State in Myanmar. And in 1902, he had a dream in which 1,050 characters were presented to him, and he proceeded to write those down. And when he did, his sickness went away, and he recovered. And so he said that this was a gift from God. And one peculiarity is that this is a syllabary in which tones are represented as well. A few years later, he modified that syllabary and turned it into an alphabet by choosing certain forms, and also then by making the tone marks very, very apparent by having them exist as standalone characters. Both of these scripts are still used by the Laipian community in Tedim. And I have successfully proposed this alphabetic script, but this script is still elusive. I see videos on YouTube of the Laipian church in Australia and in Malaysia where they have Pao Chin Hao's image and text written in this syllabary. But I cannot get anybody to respond to anything that I write to them in English. So if there are any Tandem speakers, or if you know of any Tandem speakers, please put them in touch with me. I would love to finally have this syllabary encoded in Unicode. Now, other neographies that are also encoded. Another one is Gondi, which was developed by Mangal Singh Masaram for writing a Dravidian language in 1928, and he modeled his script on Brahmi, but he introduced a very unique structural feature for all the consonants in which a stroke represents the inherent vowel. So if you look at that chart on that magazine cover, you'll see all of the consonants have a line that goes to the right. And the way in which you indicate the absence of that inherent vowel is by not writing that line. So you write conjuncts by stringing along the bare form and then you don't have to deal with conjuncts or special forms for consonant clusters. And then vowel signs all fit and fall above that line. So that line functions, it has a very important function in the script. And then in 1980, Muhammad Hanif invented Rohingya, which was used for writing in Indo-Aryan language spoken in Myanmar. And this script was encoded a few years ago, and it was inspired on the Arabic model, and it is used among the Rohingya diaspora. And I think Muhammad Noor, who will be on a video call later on in a different talk, pardon? Oh, sorry, that was last time. Yeah, he was instrumental in helping me understand this script and in contacting users and getting the materials needed to get this encoded in Unicode. Now, there are other neographies that are being proliferated within South Asia. So there's an academic, that's what she calls herself, named Prasanna Sri, who has taken a personal initiative in designing scripts for indigenous languages of India. She's done up to 19 now. And so this presents a very curious issue because her actual motivations are unclear. She states that she's doing this to give the power of writing to these communities, but these communities can already write in other scripts, and also a lot of these communities have their own pre-existing neography, like Gondi, for example. Now, here's an article from 2019 in which it was declared by this newspaper that this professor enters the World Atlas of Endangered Alphabets. Now, here we have an example of Tim Brooks's project kind of being used as a little ego project, passion project here by this individual. So we also have an issue of competing neographies, where for writing Kuruk, another Dravidian language, you have two different scripts. They are both equally as old, meaning they were both invented in the 1980s. They both have recognition to an extent in different states. Like Kuruk Banna has some semi-official recognition in West Bengal for use in education, whereas Tolong Siki has some semi-official recognition for use in state examinations in Jharkhand. So one question that we have for Unicode is, how many neographies do we actually encode? And even though there may be some sort of official status for these scripts, what is the likelihood of usage within the standard? Another competing neography is the Gurung script of Nepal. So this article says that it had no written script at one point, and now it has 5. And the script that's shown here is Gurung Khema, for which there is a proposal by Biswajit Mandal. I had mentioned that script back in 2010 and never followed up on it because of this precise issue, that there was a competing script back then called Gurung Khema Phri, and the community did not have expressed any sort of interest in either because they just continued to use Devanagari, which is the prescriptive script for all indigenous languages of Nepal. So in some features of South Asian neographies, the typologies are alpha-syllabic, alphabetic, and syllabic. Very different from the sort of highly pictographic aspect of, let's say, Nisibdi or the script that Deborah showed, that the line drawing one. I can't remember the name of it. Pardon? Okay. And then the origins for most of these are internal development, with the exception of the scripts that Prasanna Sri created. The motivations all can be grouped into let's say 3. A creator will say that I'm motivated because I was given some sort of mandate by a higher being to create the script. This is the case for Warang Citi and Pao Chin Hao. In many cases, the creator wanted to have a written first form for the language, and these are actually not mutually exclusive. All 3 can apply to a given script. But the most potent motivation of all is that there is a visible and distinctive identity for a given language. Now, the status of Neographies is that script creation is active and that scripts are proliferating within South Asia. So there are some metrics that I want to discuss in order to gauge the suitability of encoding a script. And actually, I want to come back to this slide after I present this. So based on a conversation that is taking place on the Unicode mailing list, James Cass came up with a very clear-cut summary, which I think can be applied to all Neographies. And these are these two cases. That case one, where I'm an inventor and I have designed a brand new writing system for my community or for a specific linguistic community. I want it to be in Unicode so that it has a standard form. Because once it's in the standard, I can have something to point to and say, hey, look, this consortium has approved and standardized this script, and now I can convince people to commit to the script. Case two is that either we or me, I have developed a new writing system for our community, and we're using this system to publish books, periodicals, and we're using it in education, and the people have embraced this script with a positive sentiment. So I think this is an excellent breakdown presented by James, which I want to just regurgitate here, and go into my one case study, because I want to save time for a discussion. But I want to use Sunuwar as a case, a model case of a Neography that is highly suitable for encoding. But there are certain caveats here. So I started researching Sunuwar back in 2010, and in September of last month, I submitted a formal proposal to encode the script. So for the last 11 years, I've been monitoring this script to the best of my ability outside of Nepal. And I've seen that the community has been using the script. It is used in education, it's used in print publication, it's used in digital publication. People are developing fonts. People have developed keyboards for it. There is a Sunuwar Welfare Society that has created a script panel for evaluating the development of this script. And it wasn't until June of last year that Jeanette Stewart of Translation Commons put me in touch with Dev Kumar Sunuwar, who is now the liaison between Script Encoding Initiative, Translation Commons, and the Sunuwar community. And we are systematically going over documents, raising questions. The questions are being taken by Dave and being presented to that panel in Nepal, and they provide us with written feedback. And so we go through an iterative process of determining how stable is the repertoire, how many characters, how old are these characters, and for the new characters that you have added to the script, what was the motivation for them, for the additions? How is there buy-in from the user community on these new characters, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a process in place which has led to the community being able to, in a very guided fashion, use this script to teach it to the community, and then to slowly advocate for the script very methodically. So they are now publishing which I believe to be a monthly digital magazine, which is published in both Sunuwar, it's the Sunuwar language, printed in both Devanagari and in the Sunuwar script. And the goal of doing this is to start off by having content be Devanagari heavy, with some Sunuwar, and then eventually shifting it to 50-50, and eventually so that it's overwhelmingly Sunuwar, until they can have enough of a readership that has fluency in the script so that they can go to a full Sunuwar publication at some time in the future. And they have a chart that they have that they publish in the magazine that they have circulated among the community. And as of in January of this year, a local government in Nepal, but also the government of Sikkim in India, where Sunuwar is a official state language, have said that they will be using this script for mother tongue education in Sunuwar, I think starting next year. So I think that the Sunuwar case is exemplary in the fact that I've been advocating for the script to be encoded in Unicode, but I have a very conservative threshold when it comes to Neographies, in that I want to see proof, I want to see community buy-in, and I want to see stability of the repertoire. A lot of the scripts that are coming in the pipeline, like Gurung, like Tani Lipi, like the Kirat scripts, they're being changed, and they're changing the glyph shapes. They're adding new characters, and in many cases, it's the work of one individual. On the Sunuwar side, even though this script was created in 1940 by one individual, it wasn't until 2000 that new characters were added by a scholar to expand the ability of the script to cover all Sunuwar sounds. And when he introduced those new characters, that repertoire was then approved by the community itself, by what they call the Koinchbu, or the Sunuwar Brotherhood, who said, okay, we will use these characters in official publications coming out of our organization. And then from that point on, now the Sunuwar Welfare Society has taken on the stewardship of the script, and now they have a panel. So whenever they have new features that they want to introduce, they have a panel discussion, and they weigh the pros and cons of looking at these new characters, and then they go forward. Like the most recent addition was a recommendation by the Sunuwar Welfare Society to use Latin tone marks for indicating Tibeto-Burman tones in Sunuwar, like grave, acute, and then a colon for a stress mark. A vertical bar for a stress mark, and then colon for a long vowel. Now, to me, this is the way that Neographies should be developed in conjunction with an encoding. So once Jeanette got in touch with Deborah and I back in June of last year, I was very hesitant. I said, this script is not ready to be encoded yet. We need to see if it's stable. And working with that community gave me a really strong sense that this script is ready, to the point where I was not hesitant any longer to write a brand new proposal. And I am advocating very, very strongly for the inclusion of the script in Unicode, because to some extent it does point to case one, that once it's in the standard, it can help Sunuwar to understand and to use their script, but then also because the community points to the last point in case two, which is that they are embracing this system. So one of the chief motivators for me is that there are 57,000 Sunuwar in Nepal and Sikkim, but only around 18,000 actually speak their mother tongue. And the community is trying to, number one, preserve awareness of their mother tongue. At the same time, they're trying to preserve this script, which was created back in 1940 by Karna Bahadur Jentish. And I think the language preservation and script preservation go hand in hand, and the community is small enough and tightly knit enough that they can use this script for the purpose of linguistic preservation as well. So going back to these metrics, these are the high-level metrics. Standardized usage. Is there institutional support? Is there publications in the script that are not done by the script creator or by the script advocate? Is there any religious usage or religious symbolism associated with the script? What's the community sentiment like? what are the current technological resources for the script, and who is the person requesting the inclusion of the script in Unicode? So with that, I would like to go to the discussion. What factors should be taken into consideration when evaluating proposals for encoding Neographies? And I'll leave it at this metrics page. We have 6 minutes? Crap, I wanted to give us 10, but I'm trying to drone on way too long, so thank you. Ben? Manish? No, anybody. Yeah, I wanted to have a discussion about the metrics that we can use to evaluate Neographies, like which of these would be considered high priority, which ones are not so important, which ones should be disregarded, are there any that I have left off that should be considered?
I mean, there's just setting our goalposts. Obviously, if the only documents we have are from the guy who made the script up, you know, that's what we use. That's a real basic one, of course, you know. So, you have to show that, like, more than one person is using this. You know?
There's also the chicken and egg problem, because, like, right now, I don't handwrite that much. In fact, like, the most that I handwrite is in Chinese for homework, because I want to learn to write. I don't, like, so, like, expecting a user community to generate text, when where that text to work, I mean, we all know about the chicken and egg. Not there, maybe, like, I guess.
I'm going to pause you and ask you to repeat everything you just said.
I thought I wasn't supposed to be a speaker. Yeah, like there's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. Like I don't write much at all these days. I type everything or text type with my hands, and like the only time I write is when I'm writing homework in Chinese. So the most I write is Chinese, a language I speak, or set of languages I don't speak that well. And it seems arduous to require user communities to come up with written usage, handwritten usage, when our society is by and large technical and using text, like on computers. Of course, this is not all society, but this is true in many places, and I think it would be cool if we could figure out a way to cut the Gordian knot. Like, for example, people do use private use areas fonts to kind of bootstrap a usage, but then you have the problem of, oh, well, now we have a bunch of people using this language in a private use area that we don't want them to support for a while. So there might be even a way to, like, kind of provisionally do stuff. I don't know. But I definitely would like us to solve this problem. I don't have a solution. I'm just saying we have a problem. And I also know that many of the people in the room know that we have this problem. So, yeah.
Well, I'll take the mic since we're supposed to use the mic. No, I'm not going to solve it, but I'm just going to ask the question, is there really a Gordian knot? Because if I think like 25 years ago, there were people that were creating, what we used to call hack fonts. Before applications were using Unicode, right? They were creating fonts using code page 1252, reallocating code points to entirely different characters so they could publish documents, right? Now, of course, today we know that people want to exchange text messages or something, right? And that approach doesn't work for something like text messaging on your phones, but it isn't an obstacle for example, teachers wanting to, produce materials to teach in their schools. So is the text messaging really the thing that we need to unblock so that these communities can go forward? Or is old style, the kinds of things that were being done 25 years ago before PUA was what you did, is that enough to get the wheel moving to establish usage in a community?
I mean, to put it bluntly, I don't think it's a real language if you're only teaching it and never using it. And we all know that. And so, yeah, we can kind of bootstrap that through teaching materials and stuff, but that is kind of backwards to how language evolves. And I think if we want there to be, and the thing about this is in script ad hoc, if there's just teaching material for it and nothing else, we also are because anyone, if I design a writing system and be like, all right, you gotta use Manish writing for Marathi tomorrow, please encode it, Debbie. I can write all the teaching materials I want. I can get Ben to write some for me, so it's not just me doing it. Ben would have some fun, but I think we're looking for user community usage, and we need to look for user community usage, but we can't. It's a hard ask. It's a really hard ask, and I'm not sure. I think that is a Gordian, or I'm sure there's a way to cut it, but I think it's a hard problem, and I think teaching materials aren't enough because they're not teaching materials are documentation of language. They're not language themselves.
Well, and I think going back to one of the points that was made in an earlier talk of users aren't as good as technology as the people in this room, that the skill to make your own font and hack your own font, especially in, for users who may have mobile devices as their only device, where, trying to make and create and install your own font on a mobile device is much more prohibitive than when everyone was using desktops. And even with the teaching point, if all of teaching has pivoted to online because of COVID, and so you're teaching people via WhatsApp, that gets more. I think it is a Gordian knot. I have no more suggestions about how to solve it either, but I think that there's still barriers.
All right, I got the solution. No, okay. So one thing I was thinking about is and I'm just spitballing here, by the way. So, is one way that you could figure this out is that we're talking about POA stuff, right? One slight issue with using POA is the properties. You can almost imagine having a POA section where we actually set certain properties on them in advance. Okay, we have this RTL POA section or something like that, or POA with index properties already set on some of these things. And it's almost like a training wheels for Neography kind of thing. Maybe they could do a hacked font into there, but the good news is that they wouldn't have to hack it too crazily because it might actually still work in existing technology if the Unicode properties are set properly. And then if it does pick up, maybe you could move it into properly encoded.
But only if it's a left or right script. There's no RTL PUA.
That's what I'm advocating for. Yeah. RTL PUA is what I'm advocating for.
One of the things that I think that a lot of the big vendors have really dropped the ball on field upgradability of Unicode versions. So people, they put on, now we support Unicode 14 or whatever it is, but an end user, like an engineer who has root access to a device, can't easily go in and replace the tables for something post 14.0 with an experimental encoding for XYZ and get it to work. A problem that Neographies come up against. Oh, I just want to remind everybody also to fill out the evaluation forms, and we're over time.
Thanks everyone for attending this talk. I really appreciate it. If you have any input on Neographies and metrics, please get in touch with either Deborah or me. And also, if you have any ideas about using conscript registry as a stepping stone into the encoding, I'm happy to discuss that outside. Thank you.